Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at the table saw and how to go from beginner to proficient. All right, very first thing we're going to do is not wear gloves. We do not wear gloves with power tools. Gloves keep our hands closer to the cutting surface, which can result in getting caught in the blade and having our hands be pulled in, which is very dangerous. All right, next what we're going to do is we're going to find a fairly flat material to cut that also has a straight edge to be against the fence. And since there's such a big discrepancy between the length and the width of this board, we're always going to use the long side of the board against the fence and never the short side. All right, now with the blade down, we're going to take a few practice runs of cutting, and we're just going to push it through nice and slow. Our left hand is our support hand, and our right hand is our pushing, feeding hand. With our support hand, we're going to use our thumb to put pressure down onto the table, and we're going to use our forefinger to put pressure into the fence. And as we push through, we make sure we keep our fingers away from the blade, also keeping pressure against the fence. Now, when we keep pressure against the fence, we're going to do that before the saw blade. We're not going to do that at the place of the saw blade or behind the saw blade. We're going to keep our pressure before the saw blade. And then we're just going to feed it, okay? Once we hit the table as we're feeding it, we're going to flip our right hand to a more comfortable position. And then with our right hand, we're going to maintain pressure against the fence. Before we start cutting, we're going to make sure that our blade is square to our table using a regular square or a digital angle gauge. Then we're going to make sure that the blade is equal distance from the front and the back to the fence, or the back of the fence is 1/32 further away than the front. Then we're going to make sure that we have a secure riving knife behind the blade or a guard. And lastly, we're going to check that our throat plate is not protruding above the table. And if it is, we're going to use the 4 adjustment screws to adjust. All right, time to cut. We're going to raise our blade so that it is 1/4 to 1/2 inch above the material that we're going to be cutting. If we're going to be cutting all the way through, which you will be most of the time that you use a table saw. All right, so for demonstration purposes, I'm using MDF, medium density fiber board. But when you're cutting solid stock of wood, what usually happens is the riving knife sometimes likes to pull your piece away from the fence, which results in an inaccurate cut. So what we're doing here is we want our strip to be 5 inches wide. So I set the fence at 5 inches and 1/16, took the first pass, and then I'm going to move the fence ever so slightly, 1/16 towards the blade, and then run the piece through and clean up that edge, making sure that I have an accurate cut. The reason being is now I have material only on one side of the blade, which calls for a very clean and smooth cut. If you have material on both sides of the blade, usually what you're going to end up with is a cut that is slightly less than you intended. Now, if you noticed, I wasn't letting the piece come off the fence, and also I wasn't tilting the piece. Just need to keep it flat and keep it against the fence, and you'll have a good cut. Now you can, however, lift the backside or the front side up as you're coming into the cut if your blade is 90 degrees to your table. As you see here, I have the backside lifted way up, and as I'm approaching the cut, I bring it down. That is perfectly safe, and it does not reduce your level of accuracy. And a quick tip, most table saws have measuring gauges in the front. So to dial those in, what you're going to do is cut any strip, any size strip. And as long as that strip remained glued to the fence throughout the whole cut, you're going to measure it out. And on the measuring gauge at the front of your table saw, you're going to find the adjustment screw and adjust it to exactly the width of the piece you just ripped. All right, let's talk about the fun stuff. We're going to take a look at kickbacks and how they happen, and then we're going to watch a real life video of a kickback that I had. So for demonstration purposes, I cut out 2 small strips to represent material on the left side and the right side of the blade. Now what you just saw is me demonstrating that the way a kickback happens is the backside of the piece gets caught on the blade and it gets shot back at you. It basically gets pinched between the blade and the fence and it gets launched towards you. This can happen because of tension in the wood as it binds, or it can happen because of unsafe practices, like as we mentioned earlier, cutting on the wrong side of the board. That can cause a lot of pinching and binding, and it can cause a kickback. And lastly, kickbacks are common whenever your piece that you're cutting is very short. Short pieces tend to pivot a lot and cause some trouble. Now, let's move on to my exciting video of the kickback. Boom, right there. As you see, the wood binds and pinches the back of the blade, and it doesn't help that there was a knot. The knot made it so that the blade, the teeth of the blade, had something really nice to catch on and then just launch it back. So overall, kickbacks are scary, but they're not the most dangerous thing when working with a table saw. Just remember, keep your hand away from the blade, and if you can't, then use a push stick, like in this clip. And if you have to ask yourself, is this safe? It's probably not. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and cut with quality, cut with quantity, and cut safely.